A 7-year-old girl in a pink nightgown and bare feet ran through the frozen parking garage, her breath visible in violent puffs, her small body shaking. Mia didn't think. She moved. Emma's feet slapped against the concrete at 2:13 in the morning. The temperature had dropped to 19 degrees. Her lips were already turning blue. Mia Hartley sprinted from the Shady Pines elder care employee entrance, her white caretaker uniform still smelling of antiseptic and cafeteria meatloaf, and the cold hit her lungs like a blade wrapped in ice. 20 feet ahead, Douglas Hale had Emma by the wrist. He was 6'2", leather jacket creased at the shoulders, predatory smile spreading across his face like something that did not belong in this world. He had followed them here. He had waited. He had been patient, and patience in a man like Douglas meant something darker than rage. Mia screamed. Not a word. Just a sound from the bottom of her body, the sound a mother makes when her child is being taken. She threw herself between them, her hands up, palms open like she could stop a grown man with nothing but the force of her desperation. "Please don't hurt my baby," she sobbed. "Please. I'll do anything. Anything." Douglas laughed. The sound echoed through the garage, bouncing off the concrete pillars. He shoved her backward, casual, like she weighed nothing. Her head cracked against the ground. The world tilted. Her vision stuttered. She tasted blood. But what Mia did not know was that across Las Vegas, in a mansion with 16 security monitors built into the mahogany wall of a private office, Giovanni Valenti sat forward in his leather chair. His chair had cost more than Mia's car. The office had cost more than her life. Everything about him spoke of a man who had taken what he wanted and kept what he claimed, and he was watching camera feed 7 with knuckles white on the desk edge. He watched the little girl run. He watched the man chase. He watched a memory claw its way back from 15 years ago, a memory he had buried so deep he thought it had turned to dust. His own niece. His brother's betrayal. The moment he learned that family meant nothing when survival was on the line. The moment he learned that love could be traded for a single breath. Giovanni's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. His eyes burned. Sergio entered without knocking. Sergio always entered without knocking. He was shorter than Giovanni, broader, with the kind of face that made people cross the street. But his voice was gentle when he spoke. "Boss. The delivery is here. The one from." Sergio saw the monitor. He saw the parking garage. He saw the little girl. Sergio stopped speaking. "Who is she?" Giovanni did not move his eyes from the screen. "I don't know, sir. The security feed just activated 15 seconds ago." "Who is the man?" "Unknown." Giovanni rose from his chair. He moved like someone in absolute control of every muscle, every breath. He was 47 years old but looked like something carved from stone. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored to the exact measurement of his shoulders, and it hung on him like a statement of intent. On his left wrist, a gold watch that had belonged to his father. On his right hand, a signet ring with the Valenti family crest. "Send Franco," Giovanni said. "Tell him to bring the girl and the woman back here. No questions. No hesitation. The man does not survive the evening." Sergio nodded and left. Giovanni returned to the monitor. He watched the screen. He watched Mia Hartley, who had just hit her head on concrete, try to push herself up. Her hands shook. There was blood in her hair. Her white uniform was torn at the shoulder. She looked at Douglas Hale with eyes that had nothing left to lose. That was when he knew she would die to protect that child. That was when he knew he had to intervene. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back 3 days, to the moment Mia Hartley's life started unraveling faster than she could stitch it back together. The mail sat on the kitchen counter of her apartment like a death sentence. Mia did not open it. She knew what it said. She had known for 6 weeks, since the first notice arrived in an envelope with a red border. $22,000 in 7 days. That was the foreclosure deadline. That was the amount she owed. That was the entire mathematics of her destruction. She had $78 in her wallet. 78. Mia counted it 3 times, spreading the bills across the kitchen table as if a fourth count might produce different numbers. One $50 bill, 3 20s, a 10, and 4 1s. Nothing in the bank. Nothing hidden. Nothing to sell except the furniture, which was worth almost nothing, and her grandmother's recipe book, which was worth everything. The recipe book sat on the shelf above the stove, bound in cloth that had once been burgundy but had faded to the color of old wine. Her grandmother had written inside the margins. Not just recipes. Stories. Advice. Survival tactics for women who had nothing. Mia had read every page 100 times. She had memorized the chicken soup recipe, the way her grandmother's handwriting curved around the ingredients with notes like enough for 3 meals, stretch it and save the bones. She could not sell that book. She could not. Emma was still asleep in the bedroom, curled under a blanket that had belonged to Mia when she was a child. She was 7 years old, with her mother's dark hair and her father's eyes, and she did not understand that her mother had been counting their remaining days the way other people counted calories. The phone on the wall rang at 4:19 in the morning. Mia's hands jumped. Nobody called at 4:02 in the morning with good news. It was Brenda from Shady Pines Elder Care, calling to ask if Mia could come in early. Patricia in room 304 had fallen again. They needed someone. Mia was the best. Could she be there by 5:30? Yes, Mia said. Yes, I can. She hung up and moved through the apartment like a ghost. She showered in water so cold it turned her skin white. She pulled her white caretaker uniform from the closet, the one that had been white when she bought it 6 months ago and had become cream-colored now from washing. She dressed while the apartment was still dark. She made a note for Emma and left it on the kitchen table with a granola bar and a juice box. She had exactly 4 hours before Emma needed to be at school. That was not a problem. School would take her until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The evening shift at Shady Pines started at 4 and ended at midnight. That meant Mia would have 1 hour to pick Emma up and drive her home and put her to bed, and then she would return to Shady Pines and work until 4 in the morning. She had been doing this for 11 months. Her body had learned to function on 2 hours of sleep. Her mind had learned not to think about how much longer she could sustain this. The drive to Shady Pines took 18 minutes through empty streets. The city was still dreaming. The only lights were traffic lights, turning red and green for no one. Mia drove a 2004 Corolla with 187,000 miles on it. It made a sound like a mechanical cough. She loved that car the way she loved Emma. It was the only thing she had that was completely hers. Shady Pines Elder Care occupied a single-story building that had been painted beige 50 years ago and had not been repainted since. The parking lot was cracked. The landscaping was brown. But inside, the facility was immaculate. Mia understood, in the way that poor people understand, that the impeccable interior and the deteriorating exterior told the same story. All the money went where it could be seen. Everything else was allowed to rot. Patricia was in room 304, sitting on the edge of the bed with one hand pressed to her left hip. She was 91 years old and had been admitted 4 months ago. She had a daughter in New York who called twice a year. Patricia's medical bills had been paid by Medicare, by Medicaid, by insurance companies arguing with other insurance companies. The real cost, the cost of the time and the attention and the exhaustion of the people who kept her alive, was invisible. Patricia, Mia said softly, approaching the bed. I'm here. You're okay. You're safe. Patricia looked up. She did not recognize Mia. She never recognized anyone after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But she was comforted by Mia's voice, the softness in it, the way Mia never made her feel like a burden. My daughter, Patricia said. Have you called my daughter? Not yet, Mia said. But we will. First, let's get you cleaned up. Let's get you comfortable. Mia spent 2 hours with Patricia. She helped her to the bathroom, helped her wash, helped her into clean clothes. Patricia talked about her daughter, about her house in New York, about a porch that faced the ocean. Mia listened. She held Patricia's hand. She made the old woman feel less alone. By the time Mia left Patricia's room, her shift was officially over. Officially. In reality, she had stayed 40 minutes past her scheduled departure, unpaid, unclocked, invisible. She drove to Emma's school, picked her up at 3:15, drove home, made a dinner that cost $2.43. Pasta, con tomato sauce, a single chicken breast divided between 2 plates. Emma ate without complaining. She was learning, in the way that children learn, what it meant to have a mother who was always tired. At 4 o'clock, Mia's phone buzzed. A text from Douglas Hale. "Let me see her." Mia's hands began to shake. She did not respond. She locked the apartment door, locked the window in the bedroom where Emma slept, locked everything that could be locked. Douglas Hale had been her boyfriend for 3 years. He had started as kindness and had become something else. He had started as a man who wanted to help her and had become a man who wanted to own her. 3 years ago, she had taken Emma and left him at 2 in the morning, with nothing but what she could carry. He had been looking for her ever since. She did not know that he had found her. She did not know that he had been watching the parking garage at Shady Pines. She did not know that tonight would be the night everything changed. At 11:45 in the evening, Mia realized she had forgotten Emma in her car. 3 days before the parking garage. 3 days before the cold that would cut through her bones like a blade. 3 days before everything. Mia Hartley sat at her kitchen table at 6:47 in the morning with the overhead light beating down in that harsh fluorescent way that makes every shadow under your eyes look permanent. The formica was chipped. The chairs did not match. One window faced the parking lot of an apartment complex that had been built in 1987 and had not been maintained since. But this was her place. Hers and Emma's. She had fought for it. On the table in front of her lay $78 in crumpled bills. She had sorted them into piles. 3 20s. 5 10s. 8 1s. The 20s were from a customer at Shady Pines who had pressed them into her hand and said, "You look like you could use this." The 10s were from her paycheck minus taxes, minus rent arrears, minus the late fees that accumulated like frost on a winter window. The 1s were coins she had counted out of Emma's piggy bank the night before, converting them in the laundromat bathroom because she had no quarters for the machines and her daughter needed clean clothes. $78. That amount needed to last until Friday. Today was Monday. 4 days. Breakfast, lunch, dinner for 2 people. Gas if the light came on in her car. Emma's lunch money for school, which the teacher had written a note about last week. The note had said, Emma mentioned she sometimes shares her lunch with other children. Is everything okay at home? Mia had written back, everything is fine, thank you for caring. Everything was not fine. Everything was a calculation she performed every morning before her daughter woke up. Beside the bills lay something worse. The foreclosure notice. Eviction. 7 days. $22,000 or she and Emma would be on the street. The letter had come last Tuesday. She had opened it at work, in the supply closet where no one could see her face change. She had read it standing among boxes of latex gloves and incontinence pads, and something in her chest had simply stopped working, like an engine running out of fuel in the middle of a highway. $22,000. She did not have 22,000 cents. The apartment was a 1-bedroom that she had turned into a 2-bedroom by hanging a curtain across the living room. Emma slept behind the curtain. Mia slept in the bedroom. The kitchen was so small that if she stood in the center and stretched her arms out, her fingers could touch both walls. The bathroom had a mold problem that no amount of bleach could solve. But it was hers. She had paid for it. Every dollar, every late payment, every time she had chosen to feed her daughter instead of eating herself, all of it had been to keep this place. And in 7 days, it would be gone. She reached for her grandmother's recipe book. The spine was cracked. The pages were stained and bent and held together by force of will and a rubber band. Her mother had left it to her, along with nothing else. No jewelry. No photographs. No letters. Just this book, written in a hand so small and careful it looked like prayer. Recipes, yes. But the margins were the real inheritance. Mia opened to a page marked in a corner with a turned-down fold. Potato and carrot soup, the recipe said. Her grandmother's handwriting explained how to use the scraps that other people threw away. How to make broth from bones. How to stretch one chicken into 8 meals. The margin said, when you have nothing left, you still have your hands and your heart. There is power in knowing how to feed people, how to make something from nothing. Do not forget this. The words blurred in front of her eyes. She did not cry. She had stopped crying somewhere around month 4 of Douglas Hale's obsession with finding her, when she realized that tears were a luxury she could not afford. But she felt something crack, small and precise, like the first line in a dam. Her phone vibrated. The time on the screen said 6:52. Her shift at Shady Pine started at 7:30. It would take her 20 minutes to drive there. She needed to wake Emma, get her dressed, drop her at school by 7:50. Emma's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, would have her in the classroom by 8 o'clock, where she would sit and learn and be safe while Mia worked 12 hours for minimum wage plus tips that rarely came and a supervisor named Janet who counted her breaths like they were costing money. She put the recipe book on the shelf beside her bed, in the spot where she could see it from her pillow. The apartment was still dark when she moved to Emma's corner, still dark when she knelt beside her daughter's sleeping form. Emma was 7 years old. She had dark hair that refused to stay in the braids Mia worked so hard to create. She had her father's eyes, a man who had been kind for 6 months and then disappeared when Mia had told him she was pregnant. She slept with her thumb in her mouth and one hand clenched around a stuffed rabbit that had cost 99 cents from the dollar store. That rabbit meant everything. Mia had learned that the things that matter have nothing to do with their price. "Wake up, baby," Mia whispered. "It's time for school." Emma opened her eyes. She did not cry or complain. She simply woke, the way children wake when they have learned that mornings are not negotiable. By 7:15, they were in the car. Emma had a lunchbox that contained a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and 8 cheese crackers in a plastic bag. Mia had eaten nothing. She would eat nothing until after she dropped Emma at school and made it to Shady Pines, where she could scrape together a lunch from the residents' trays, the oatmeal no one wanted, the toast crusts, the edge pieces of meat that came back uneaten from the rooms. The drive to Emma's school took 8 minutes. Mia pulled into the lot at 7:23. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt with the solemn focus of a child who has internalized her mother's anxiety without being told its source. She gathered her backpack. She turned to her mother. "Will you pick me up?" Emma asked. "At 3:15, Mia said. "Like always." "Okay," Emma said. And then, smaller, "Will you be tired?" Mia felt something splinter inside her chest. "I'll be fine," she said. "I'll be happy to see you." This was not a lie. But it was not the complete truth either. The complete truth was that seeing Emma was the only thing that made her keep standing. The complete truth was that her daughter's existence was both the most beautiful and most terrifying thing in her life. The complete truth was that she would trade places with Douglas Hale himself if it meant keeping this child safe and fed and believing that her mother was not falling apart. Emma kissed her cheek and climbed out. Mia waited until her daughter reached the school's front doors. She waited until Ms. Rodriguez appeared and waved. Only then did she pull out of the parking lot and point the car toward Shady Pines Elder Care. The drive took 18 minutes. She used them to practice her smile. The one that said she was fine. The one that said she had slept. The one that said she was not terrified. Shady Pines occupied a low building in an industrial part of Las Vegas, surrounded by parking lots and chain-link fences. The residents were people who had lived long enough to see the world change around them, and now they lived in rooms with beige walls and fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic and something else, something like the end of things, like time running out, like waiting. Mia clocked in at 7:29. Janet, the supervisor, looked up from her clipboard. Janet had a face like a closed fist and a bun so tight it pulled her skin upward. She had worked at Shady Pines for 17 years. She had not smiled in any of them. "You're 2 minutes late," Janet said. "That's a write-up. You're third this month." Mia did not argue. Arguing cost energy she did not have. "I'm sorry," Mia said. "It won't happen again." But it would happen again. It would happen tomorrow and the day after that, because she had a daughter and the world did not care that she was tired. The world cared about rules and timesheets and the fact that she was already one write-up away from losing this job. The morning service began at 7:35. Mia pushed the cart down the hallway, distributing trays. Each tray held oatmeal, toast, a small cup of fruit cocktail, orange juice in a paper carton. The residents ate or did not eat. Some of them recognized her. Some of them did not recognize anyone. She fed Patricia Chen in room 217, a woman whose daughter lived in New York and called every Sunday and promised to visit in the spring and never did. Patricia had told Mia this story 100 times. Mia listened like it was the first time, every time. "My daughter has a house with a porch," Patricia said, pressing her gums against the oatmeal because she had no teeth. "The porch faces the ocean." "I have never seen it." "That sounds beautiful," Mia said. She meant it. "I do not have much time left," Patricia said. It was not self-pity. It was fact. Mia did not tell her that she understood about running out of time. That she understood about having something you could not reach. Instead, she held Patricia's hand and listened to her breathe. By noon, Mia's feet hurt. By 3 o'clock, she had scraped together the remains of resident lunches into a Tupperware container. Overcooked chicken. A portion of mashed potatoes. 3 bites of green beans that no one had touched. She would heat them in the staff microwave and pretend it was a meal. She would pretend it was enough. Another caretaker, Maria, found her in the supply closet rewrapping a soiled cushion cover. "You okay?" Maria asked. Maria was kind in the way that poor people are kind to each other, with a gentleness born of shared understanding. "I'm fine," Mia said. "Just tired." But what she did not realize was that Douglas Hale sat in a truck parked across the street from Shady Pines at that exact moment, watching through binoculars as she moved past the window. He had been watching her for 3 months. He knew her schedule better than she did. He knew that she worked double shifts on Mondays and Thursdays. He knew that Emma went to Riverside Elementary. He knew that they lived in apartment 312 of the Palomar complex, and that Mia left the bathroom window slightly open to let out steam. He knew everything. He pulled out his phone and texted a number he had saved under badge. The message said, "Found her. Time to remind her what happens when she leaves." The officer on the other end texted back, "When?" Douglas typed, "Tonight." Mia clocked out at 11 o'clock in the evening. She had been awake for 17 hours. Her body felt like something that had been left in the sun too long, brittle, faded, ready to crumble if someone touched it the wrong way. She walked to her car in the empty parking garage, her keys already in her hand because this was something she had learned. Never let someone surprise you while you are digging for your keys. The garage was cold. The fluorescent lights hummed their endless song. Her footsteps on the concrete echoed back to her like a ghost following behind. She opened the driver's side door. Emma was asleep in the back seat, wrapped in 2 blankets. She had been asleep in that car for most of the day. Mia had packed her a change of clothes this morning, along with a blanket and a pillow, because daycare cost $200 a week and Mia did not have $200. She had $2.43 until Friday. So Emma spent her afternoons in the car, in the parking garage of Shady Pines, while Mia worked. The car was climate-controlled. There was a blanket. There was safety in the locked doors. Or so Mia had believed. She started the engine. The car was a 2003 Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for so long Mia did not see it anymore. She drove toward home through the November darkness, toward the apartment with its cracked formica and its one window and its rubber-banded recipe book and its $78 that would somehow need to become enough. At 11:45 in the evening, as she pulled into the parking lot of the Palomar complex, Mia realized something that made her blood move like ice water through her veins. The back seat was empty. Emma was gone. The blizzard had transformed the driveway into something unrecognizable. Mia sat in her 2003 Honda Civic, watching snow accumulate on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it, and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake coming here. The mansion rose behind her like something from another world, stone and glass and wealth arranged in perfect geometry against the darkening sky. She glanced at Emma in the passenger seat, bundled in 2 blankets, eyes wide as she took in the iron gates and security cameras and the sheer impossibility of where they were. The intercom crackled when Mia pressed the button. A man's voice, neither warm nor hostile, "State your business." She held the wallet toward the camera, her voice steadier than her hands. "I'm returning something that belongs to Mr. Valenti." The gate swung open without another word. The circular driveway held 3 black SUVs, gleaming and identical, parked with military precision. Mia felt her chest tighten as she cut the engine. This was the kind of place where people like her did not belong. She took Emma's hand and walked toward the front door, which opened before she reached it. The man in the black suit was tall, broad-shouldered, with a shoulder holster visible beneath his jacket. His name was Sergio, though Mia didn't know that yet. His eyes moved across her face once, cataloging, assessing, dismissing. "Wait here," he said, and closed the door. Mia stood in the foyer with Emma pressed against her leg. The marble floor reflected the chandelier like water. Oil paintings of Italian countryside hung on walls painted in soft cream. Everything smelled like money, leather and lemon oil and expensive wood. She held Emma's hand tighter, suddenly aware that her coat was frayed at the cuffs, that her shoes were worn thin at the heels, that her daughter's winter boots were 2 sizes too small because buying new ones meant 3 days of unpaid meals. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Slow, measured, deliberate. The man who descended the curved staircase moved like someone accustomed to rooms falling silent when he entered. Mid-40s, sharp-featured, dark suit cut perfectly to his frame, silver threading through his hair at the temples. His eyes were the color of storm clouds before rain. Giovanni Valenti stopped when he saw Emma. Something flickered across his face, a door opening briefly before closing again. He recovered so quickly Mia almost missed it. "You returned my wallet," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Mia held it toward him, her hands betraying her with a slight tremor. "I found it at the care home. Everything's inside." Giovanni opened it without looking away from her. He counted the bills with his thumb, a gesture meant to remind her of what she had not taken. $3,400. Most people would have kept it. Mia's voice came out thin but steady. "It wasn't mine to keep." He studied her the way a man studies a photograph he's been looking for. Her worn coat. The way her daughter clung to her leg. The particular exhaustion of someone who had not slept properly in months. But she had returned the wallet anyway, and this fact seemed to matter to him in a way Mia didn't understand. He gestured toward the hallway. "Please. Sit. I'd like to thank you properly." Mia hesitated. Every instinct told her to leave, to return to her car and her life and the safe smallness of her poverty. But Emma was looking up at her with cold reddened cheeks, and Giovanni had mentioned something that made her falter. "The kitchen just made hot chocolate," he said, looking at Emma. "My chef makes it the way my daughter used to like it." The study was larger than Mia's entire apartment. Leather chairs faced a fireplace where real flames burned behind glass. Books lined the walls in orderly rows. Security monitors glowed softly in the corner, showing feeds from different angles, gates, driveway, perimeter. A photograph in a silver frame sat on the desk. Giovanni's dead wife, Mia realized immediately. The knowledge came from the way he had not turned the frame away. Another man, Franco, older, with scarring on his knuckles, brought hot chocolate for Emma and coffee for Mia. He set them down with the precision of someone who had learned to move carefully in spaces where one wrong gesture could mean violence. Emma clutched the mug with both hands, steam rising toward her small face. Giovanni settled into the chair across from her. He picked up the photograph without looking at it, as though his hands knew the path. My wife. 10 years ago. Cancer. Mia's voice softened. I'm sorry. Giovanni set the frame back down gently. She would have liked you. She always said you could tell everything about a person by what they do when no one's watching. He leaned forward slightly. What do you need? Mia stiffened. The question was too direct, too invasive. I don't need anything. I just came to return. Giovanni cut her off, his voice still quiet. You drove through a blizzard to return a wallet when you could have kept the cash. That's not nothing. That's principle. I respect principle. So I ask again, what do you need? The words broke free like a dam collapsing. The $22,000 foreclosure notice waiting at home. Douglas appearing at her door at 2 a.m., pounding and screaming. Her mother's medical debt that refused to die even though her mother had. The way Emma slept in the car while Mia worked double shifts because daycare cost more than she made. The way she had exactly $78 to her name and 7 days before the world ended. She stopped, horrified at herself. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. Giovanni's expression didn't change. I asked. Tell me about your ex. So she did. She told him about Douglas Hale, the way one confesses a sin, the hitting, the tracking, the police who never came, the friends in the department who made sure nothing happened. She told him about the night at 2 a.m. when she had barricaded Emma's door with her own body while he screamed outside. Franco and Sergio exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years. It was the look that came before violence. They stepped subtly closer to the door, ready. Giovanni, and the $22,000? Mia pulled the foreclosure notice from her purse with hands that shook. Her mother's cancer treatment. The loans that never ended. The hospital bills that kept arriving months after the funeral. She whispered the number, $1,900 a month after taxes. Rent was $950. Everything else disappeared into survival. Giovanni read the notice. He handed it back. You're a caretaker. Double shifts. What do you make? She could not meet his eyes. $14.50 an hour. He sat back, and she could see him calculating. Running numbers that everyone else had already run. Understanding the mathematics of her disappearance. Sergio shifted slightly, muttering in Italian so quietly she almost missed it. Boss, she's got the look. The same look your sister-in-law had before. Giovanni silenced him with a single glance sharp as a blade. To Mia, why would you return the wallet when you need the money so badly? She lifted her eyes to meet his. Because it wasn't mine. I don't take things that don't belong to me, no matter how desperate I am. My grandmother raised me better than that. She reached into her purse and pulled out the recipe book, cloth-covered, pages dog-eared, margins filled with handwriting in a careful, old-fashioned script. This is all she left me. Every margin has a lesson. She opened it, showing him lines in her grandmother's hand. When you have nothing, you still have your word. The strong ones are the ones who keep standing when everyone else has fallen down. We do not steal bread. We make our own. Giovanni took the book carefully, cradling it like something alive. He read the margins, and something in his face changed. The hardness softened, just for a moment. His dead wife's voice echoed in his memory. You can tell everything about a person by what they do when no one's watching. He handed the book back. Your grandmother was wise. Mia, she survived things I can't imagine. The depression. Losing her husband. Raising my mother alone. I figure if she could survive all that, I can survive this. What she didn't know was that beneath the desk, Giovanni's fingers moved across his phone screen. 3 messages sent in rapid succession to his financial manager, his head of security, his lawyer. Wire $22,000 to Shady Pines under Employee Emergency Assistance Grant. Find everything on Douglas Hale. I want his entire life on my desk by morning. Make them untraceable. The blizzard intensified. Snow hammered against the windows like something trying to break through. Mia stood. I should go before the roads get worse. Thank you for the coffee. Giovanni walked her to the door. The foyer felt smaller somehow, more intimate. His voice was different when he spoke, something underneath the controlled surface. You're welcome here anytime. If you need anything. I don't take charity, Mia cut him off. Giovanni smiled slightly, and for a moment he looked younger, less like a man who had seen terrible things. I wasn't offering charity. I was offering friendship. There's a difference. Mia left before she could respond. Emma waved from the passenger seat, and Giovanni watched from the window until the taillights disappeared into the whiteout. Sergio approached from the shadows. Boss, what are you thinking? Giovanni's jaw tightened. I'm thinking about my brother. How he sold the family to save himself. How he begged for mercy and I gave him none because mercy is weakness. But that woman just showed me something I forgot. Sometimes strength looks like returning a wallet when you're starving. At 11:45 p.m., Mia pulled into the parking lot of the Palomar complex. An envelope waited under her door, cream-colored, official. Inside, a letter from Shady Pines administration. You have been selected for our new Employee Emergency Assistance Grant, $22,000 to be applied directly to your foreclosure. Congratulations. She read it 3 times, not understanding, not connecting it to anything except the grace of coincidence. She sank to the floor with Emma wrapped around her and cried. But 3 miles away, in a penthouse office overlooking the city, Cordelia Blackwood received a phone call. Giovanni Valenti just wired $22,000 to some caretaker with a kid, her informant said. Cordelia's face went cold. She had been trying to win Giovanni back for 2 years. Every charity gala. Every carefully engineered encounter. Every reminder of their shared past. And now some poor trash with a daughter had his attention? Unacceptable. She made 2 calls. The first to Douglas Hale, whose number she obtained through channels best left unnamed. I hear you're looking for a woman named Mia Hartley. I can help you find her. I can even ensure the police look the other way. The second to her publicist, find everything on Mia Hartley. Where she works. Where she lives. Her entire history. If there's dirt, I want it. If there isn't, we'll create it. Douglas laughed on the other end of his phone, a sound like breaking glass. Finally, he said. And across the city, in the security center beneath Giovanni's mansion, footage played on 17 monitors. The parking garage. Emma being dragged toward a sedan. A man's face captured in high definition. Douglas Hale, 3 days ago, in the middle of taking a child. Giovanni watched the footage with a stillness that made his men afraid. His hands did not clench. His voice did not rise. But something in his eyes turned cold and ancient and deadly. The decision was made in silence. The freezing rain drummed against the windshield like 1,000 accusations, each drop a small hammer blow against glass, and Mia Hartley sat motionless in her car at 9:53 p.m. in the Shady Pines parking lot, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Emma slept in the back seat, her small face peaceful, one hand tucked under her cheek, breathing the shallow breath of deep sleep. The heater had long since stopped working, and Mia's exhaled breath came out in white clouds that fogged the windshield until she could barely see the empty parking lot stretching before her, the loading dock where she had walked 10,000 times, the service entrance where she clocked out 40 minutes ago with her name badge still clipped to her chest. In her wallet, $43. That was the entire world. Groceries. Emma's new school supplies. A tank of gas that would get them home, maybe to work tomorrow if she drove carefully, economically, like breathing itself had to be rationed. The $22,000 that had come through, the emergency assistance grant that had felt like a miracle, was already gone. Foreclosure paid. 3 months of back rent covered. Dental work for Emma that had been postponed so long her baby teeth had started to decay. The money that was supposed to stretch across an entire year had evaporated in 2 weeks like water spilled on summer concrete. Her phone vibrated on the dashboard. She knew before reading it that it would be Douglas. His messages had become a rhythm lately, a terrible clock ticking down towards some moment she couldn't see coming but could feel approaching like winter, inevitable and cold. She picked up the phone with trembling fingers. "You can't hide. I'll always find you. You and that little mistake in your back seat." The words seemed to frost the inside of the car. She set the phone down, didn't delete the message, couldn't bring herself to delete any of them. Evidence. For what, she didn't know. The police dispatcher had made it clear that Douglas Hale was untouchable. A respected member of the community. Friends in places that mattered. When she called to report him watching the house, watching Emma's school, the dispatcher had actually suggested they should talk things out. She closed her eyes. The rain became a sound like static, like the world was erasing itself one drop at a time, and Mia understood in that moment, sitting in her freezing car at the edge of nothing, that she was tired in a way that sleep would never fix. Bone tired. The kind of tired that lives in your marrow and your teeth and the backs of your eyelids. Soul tired, like the part of her that believed in tomorrow had finally given up, thrown down its weapons, surrendered to the simple mathematics of it all. She had nothing. Douglas had connections. Cordelia Blackwood had money and malice and a network of people who believed whatever she whispered into their ears at charity galas. And Mia had $43 and a daughter asleep in the back seat and a grandmother's recipe book sitting in a cardboard box under her bed, its margins filled with words about survival written in handwriting that had turned to dust decades ago. What if I can't do this anymore? The thought came quietly, without drama, like a simple statement of fact. What if I'm not strong enough? What if Grandma was wrong and survival isn't always enough? What if sometimes the fight is supposed to end? Then Emma shifted in her sleep, her small hand reaching across the back seat as if searching for something, and her voice came out small and drowsy. "Mama." Mia's eyes snapped open. She turned, looked at that small face, that trusting expression, and something inside her crystallized into diamond. Not hope. Not anymore. Something harder than hope. Something that didn't require belief or motivation or anything except the simple refusal to let that small face ever feel abandoned again. She started the car. The engine turned over, caught, and the heater wheezed to life, lukewarm air beginning to circulate through the freezing interior. She pulled out of the Shady Pines parking lot onto Charleston Boulevard, heading toward the little apartment that was no longer foreclosed upon, toward the night that felt like it was pressing down from above like a coffin lid. What she did not know, could not have known, was that she had been watched for 14 days straight. 3 blocks from her apartment, Douglas Hale sat in his truck in the darkness, engine off, phone in his hand, composing another message. He had become patient lately, the kind of patient that suggested he was enjoying the hunt more than the catch. He had followed her from the care facility to pick up Emma from after-school care. He had watched her pay $3 for a loaf of bread at the corner market. He had recorded the routes she took, the times she was most vulnerable, the places where she was alone with his daughter, not actually, but in his mind the distinction had become meaningless. She was prey, and Emma was leverage, and everything was arranged now, all the pieces moving toward the moment when she would understand that resistance was only resistance until someone decided to crush it entirely. A tap on his window. Douglas looked up, and Sergio stood there against the rain, water streaming off his black coat, his face expressionless, his eyes like 2 stones in a river. Behind him, Franco blocked the passenger side door. Behind them both, the street had become sealed, contained, a small geography that belonged to someone else now. Douglas rolled down the window slowly. "What do you Sergio's hand moved and the door came open and Douglas was yanked from the truck in one motion so violent it tore his shoulder, and he hit the wet pavement on his back, the wind knocked completely from his lungs. He tried to stand. Franco's boot pressed down on his chest, and Douglas understood in the space of 3 seconds exactly what was happening and exactly why. "I didn't know," he gasped. "I didn't know she was protected. You chased a 7-year-old girl through a parking garage." Sergio's voice was flat, administrative, the voice of someone reading statistics. "At 2:13 in the morning. While her mother was at work. You dragged her toward a car. A child. Giovanni Valenti saw that footage 3 days ago. Please, I'll leave. I'll disappear. I'll never." Too late for that. The voice came from the shadows, and Giovanni Valenti stepped into the streetlight like a man emerging from water. His cashmere coat hung from his shoulders, water dark, worth more than everything Douglas owned. His face was blank. "You were given chances. Many chances. You chose this." Douglas screamed as Sergio and Franco lifted him, and the scream cut off abruptly when they forced him into the back of a black van that appeared from nowhere with the precision of a military operation. The van pulled away from the curb, and the street was empty again, just rain and pavement and the truck sitting abandoned with its door hanging open like a broken jaw. Giovanni watched for exactly 3 seconds, then turned to face the small apartment building where a light had just come on in a second-floor window. He didn't cross the street. He didn't approach the building. He simply stood there in the rain, water streaming down his face, and made a decision that the rest of his life would hang upon, though he would not know that yet. The next morning, Douglas Hale's truck was found abandoned at the state line, doors locked, windows up, tires already beginning to flatten from sitting too long. A missing persons report was filed and then mysteriously closed. His apartment was cleared by people who left no trace. His phone number disconnected. The cops who had been his friends suddenly couldn't remember his face clearly enough to describe it. He became a ghost. Meanwhile, Cordelia Blackwood woke to her phone ringing at 5:33 a.m., her publicist's voice cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade. "Turn on the news. Any channel. Now." The FBI raid was already in progress. They came through her penthouse with warrants and cameras, and she was arrested in front of her building wearing a silk nightgown that had cost $800, her face captured by 3 photographers who had somehow known exactly when to be standing in the lobby, exactly where to position themselves for the most humiliating angles. Tax evasion. Charity fraud. The paintings on her walls were seized. Her bank accounts frozen. By noon, the Society columnists had pivoted, and suddenly every story about her became a story about cruelty, the maid she had locked out of her penthouse for bringing the wrong mineral water, the staff member she had publicly humiliated for her accent, the donations to her foundation that had never actually reached any charity but had instead been funneled into her personal accounts. Her engagement to a European aristocrat was cancelled via email. The country club revoked her membership. Within 7 days, Cordelia Blackwood had transformed from society queen to social pariah, and she did not understand why, only that somewhere in the machinery of her destruction, her informant had disappeared, her inside sources had evaporated, and the man she had been trying to manipulate had instead orchestrated her complete and systematic humiliation. Giovanni made 4 phone calls, and the rest was simply consequence unfolding. Mia discovered none of this immediately. She went to work at Shady Pines and found that the corporate calls had stopped. She picked Emma up from school and no one mentioned Douglas. She saw a brief news item about Cordelia Blackwood's arrest on the TV in the break room, felt a strange lightness settle over her, and understood without being told that something had changed. She didn't know how. She didn't know why. She only knew that the shadow that had been pressing down on her had lifted, and the sky above her, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel like it was closing in. That night, she read a story to Emma from her grandmother's recipe book, not a recipe but one of the handwritten margins on the back page. Survival is the first act of love. But only the first. After survival comes living. And living requires someone to show you it's safe to live. That is the gift we give each other. Mia closed the book and held her daughter close, and somewhere across the city, Giovanni Valenti sat in his office watching security footage of that small apartment, the light coming on, a child laughing, a woman's face finally at peace. 3 months had passed since the night the shadow lifted. 3 months of mornings that didn't taste like ash, of days that moved forward instead of crushing down, of a small apartment with heat that worked and locks that actually held. Mia Hartley stood in the break room at Shady Pines Elder Care, folding her uniform into her locker, and for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't calculating rent in her head. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, had called her into the office that afternoon. Mia had felt her stomach drop, that old familiar panic, the one that came with any summons from authority. But instead of termination papers, Mrs. Chen had slid a new employment contract across the desk. Senior caretaker position. $3 more per hour. Permanent. Mia had read it 3 times before the words actually landed. "You've earned this," Mrs. Chen had said, studying her over reading glasses. "The residents ask for you by name. Your shift reports are impeccable. And whatever changed in your life over the last few months, whatever gave you this steadiness, I hope it stays. Don't lose it." Mia hadn't answered, just signed her name carefully, her hand almost shaking. $3 per hour meant $40 more per week, $160 more per month. It meant Emma's school field trip she could now actually afford. It meant not choosing between her daughter's winter coat and the electric bill. Emma was thriving in ways that still caught Mia off guard. Her daughter's 3rd grade teacher, Miss Rivera, had called her 2 weeks ago to report that Emma had made 3 new friends, that her reading level had jumped 2 grades, that she volunteered in class and raised her hand without fear. "Something's different about her," Miss Rivera had said warmly. "She's more confident. Like she finally believes the world is safe." The apartment had come through almost by accident. Mia had been walking past a corner store when she saw the flyer taped in the window, 2-bedroom unit, rent-controlled, background check required. She'd applied on a whim, expecting rejection. Instead, the landlord had run her credit, found it catastrophic, and then done something incomprehensible. He'd approved her anyway. When she'd asked why, confusion had crossed his weathered face. "Seemed right," he'd said, and that was all. The corporate grant that had covered her foreclosure had been labeled Employee Assistance Fund, and when Mia had called to thank them, the voice on the phone had confirmed the help was real but suggested no further questions. She'd accepted it as grace, as the world finally deciding she'd suffered enough. Small miracles had accumulated like snow. A birthday bouquet arrived at work with no card, flowers in shades of blush and cream that matched a sketch in her grandmother's recipe book, the one where her grandmother had written the margins about strength, about making something from nothing, about love as the first language of survival. A parking ticket she'd received, one she'd agonized over for days, had simply disappeared from the system before she had to pay it. Emma's school had waived the registration fee due to administrative error. The coffee shop where Mia sometimes bought a single espresso on her break always had one waiting for her, paid for by the lady before you. She'd stopped trying to understand it. Instead, she'd simply worked harder. She'd picked up an extra shift each week and saved the money in a jar, not for survival anymore, but for building. For Emma's piano lessons. For a small emergency fund. For the possibility of a future that didn't pivot on a single missed shift or unexpected expense. For the first time, Mia was building forward instead of just hanging on. What she didn't know was that across the city, in an office 40 floors above the street, Giovanni Valenti sometimes pulled security footage from her apartment building during late hours of the night. He'd watch the light come on in her window. He'd see her reading to Emma, her daughter curled against her side. He'd observe her at the small kitchen table, studying for her GED, a goal she'd written down in pencil because she didn't yet believe it was possible. He'd watched her mouth the words of her grandmother's recipes, learning to cook from the margins, from the notes about living, about survival becoming joy. Franco had asked him once, holding 2 cups of espresso at 4 in the morning as Giovanni sat in the dark with the monitors glowing before him, "Boss, why don't you just talk to her?" Giovanni hadn't answered for a long moment. When he did, his voice was steady and quiet, because she needs to stand on her own first. I won't be the man who saves her. I'll be the man who stands beside her when she's ready. There's a difference, Franco. One makes her dependent. The other makes her strong. Franco had left the coffee and withdrawn without another word, but in his heart, he knew something had shifted in Giovanni Valenti. Something fundamental. Something that had nothing to do with power. The charity event happened on a Thursday in late November, the kind of frozen evening where the sky hangs low and threatening. Shady Pines was catering for a fundraiser at the Palladium Hotel, and Mia had volunteered for the shift. Extra money. That was always the answer to any opportunity now. She moved through the kitchen in her catering uniform, black pants and a crisp white shirt, her hair pinned back, her hands moving with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to work fast and clean. She was arranging hors d'oeuvres on silver platters when she felt it, that peculiar shift in the air, the way the room's energy changes when someone important enters a space nearby. Through the service window, she saw him. Giovanni Valenti stood in the ballroom beyond, dressed in a black tuxedo that cost more than 3 months of her old rent, speaking with donors who hung on his words. He moved like someone accustomed to occupying space, to the world arranging itself around him. His dark hair, silvered slightly at the temples, caught the ballroom's chandelier light. His expression was controlled, distant, the expression of a man used to maintaining boundaries. Their eyes met across the room. It was a split second, nothing more. But in that moment, something in Giovanni's carefully constructed distance fractured. His hand stilled in mid-gesture. The man beside him continued speaking, unaware that his attention had gone elsewhere. Giovanni excused himself and moved toward the service entrance with deliberate calm. Mia's hands had stopped moving. She became acutely aware of the small kitchen sounds, the hum of the industrial refrigerator, the distant clink of glasses, her own breathing, which had grown shallow. He stepped through the kitchen door. The sound of it closing behind him was like a punctuation mark. Mia Hartley. His voice was different here, in this smaller space. Deeper somehow. More present. Mr. Valenti. She wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly conscious of how that made her look, a woman in service, caught mid-task. I didn't know you attended these events. I don't usually. He stepped closer, and Mia felt the weight of his presence, the way the kitchen seemed to contract around him. But I heard the care home was catering and I thought, he paused, and for a moment, something vulnerable crossed his expression, something she'd never expected to see. I wanted to see how you were doing. I'm good. The words came out smaller than she intended. Really good, actually. Things have been better. Giovanni nodded, like he already knew this information, like he'd watched this transformation unfold day by day. I'm glad. You deserve better. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of questions Mia didn't have words for. Finally, her voice trembling slightly, that grant. The one that paid my foreclosure. Did you? Yes. The single word landed like a stone in still water. Mia's breath caught. Her hand clenched the edge of the counter. Why? Giovanni stepped closer, his voice low enough that the kitchen staff couldn't hear him from across the room, because I saw you return my wallet when you had every reason to keep it. Because I watched footage of you protecting your daughter from a man who should never have been near her. Because my own brother betrayed our family to save himself, and I've spent 15 years forgetting what loyalty looks like. You reminded me. I didn't do it for a reward. Mia's voice was almost fierce. I know. Giovanni's dark eyes held steady. That's exactly why I helped. Mia, listen to me. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and built something on the other side. Outside the kitchen window, snow had begun to fall. Fat, lazy flakes that accumulated on the ledge, silent and inevitable. The ballroom music played distantly, muffled by walls and distance. Mia's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I don't know how to thank you. Giovanni reached out, took her hand. His touch was warm. Solid. Don't thank me. Stand beside me. Mia looked at him, really looked, at the scar running from his left temple to his cheekbone, at the silver rings on his fingers, at the man beneath the expensive suit and the controlled power. She asked quietly, as what? As my equal. His grip on her hand didn't loosen. As someone who understands that strength isn't about power or money or fear. It's about doing the right thing when it costs you everything. You taught me that. You taught me that loyalty means something. That family isn't something you're born into, it's something you build. Mia reached out with her other hand, placed it over his. The gesture was simple. Profound. Around them, the kitchen continued its work, oblivious. They stood together in the doorway between two worlds, the glittering ballroom beyond and the ordinary kitchen where she worked, where her hands had learned to feed people, where her strength had been forged in small daily choices. Snow fell outside. The music played. And somewhere in the machinery of the city, consequences were still unfolding for the people who had tried to destroy her. 1 year later, Christmas Eve arrived dressed in white and cold. Giovanni's mansion had been transformed into something Mia still couldn't quite believe was real. It wasn't the sterile elegance it had been when she delivered his wallet in that blizzard. Now it was warm. There were lights in every window, a massive tree in the atrium that Emma had decorated with Sergio and Franco, who pretended annoyance but smiled when she asked them to lift her higher to place the star. Mia stood in the kitchen, his kitchen, where she spent half her time now, preparing her grandmother's recipes. The book lay open beside her, those precious handwritten margins finally being used for what they were meant for, joy instead of survival. She tasted the minestrone soup, added salt, looked up as Giovanni entered. He watched her with an expression that still sometimes caught her off guard, the way he looked at her, like she was the most valuable thing in his carefully ordered world. Perfect, she said. Just like she used to make it. Your grandmother would be proud. Giovanni moved closer. Not just of the soup. Mia smiled, truly smiled, with the kind of lightness that comes from having stood in darkness and chosen to walk forward anyway. I think she would be. I'm finally living the way she taught me, with my hands and my heart. Emma's laughter echoed through the hallway. Sergio was teaching her chess. Franco was making hot chocolate the special way. This was not a traditional family bound by blood and obligation. This was something Giovanni had rebuilt from ash, a family built on choice, on loyalty earned rather than demanded, on standing beside each other instead of standing alone. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. Mia stood at the mansion window later that night, watching snow fall over Las Vegas. Emma slept in a room upstairs that had become her room, safe and warm. Giovanni stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. Regrets? He asked. Not one. Good. He turned to face her. Because I would spend 15 more years in the dark if it meant you walked into the light. The snow continued to fall, silent and absolute, covering the city in white forgiveness. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.